everybody, welcome to month chunk 4 of the Kathleen story chunk of the month. And this month we're going to assemble the windows. So these little guys here. I'm going to be honest with you. When I made the original, they send you the fabric and you only have a certain amount of fabric. And I did cut my browns incorrectly. I was trying to play around with a tiny 1/8 of an inch piece and it didn't work. And I ended up cutting up a lot of my fabrics. So full disclosure, I ended up using the rest that I had. And most of it was this brown tossed fabric. And then I had some from my strips left over. So really what I want to tell you is this. Number 1, with your brown, strip it. And I tell you in the directions to please cut out these strips first so that you have a piece big enough for the door. And then you're going to set these aside. And then from the rest, you can cut out these pieces. It does not matter from which brown that you cut or from which background that you cut. So I did not include the Quilt As You Go numbers for this one. The only thing that I did notate were the backgrounds with the floral patterns in them. And I noted that on the pattern when we get to putting the house together, you'll see a window that'll say F, and that just means that's where the flower is. But anything else, it really and truly doesn't matter. So just have fun with it, and this is a good opportunity to use some of the little bits and pieces of things that you cut into earlier. Utilize the little pieces. And honestly, all 4 of these windows do not need to even match. It can be really and truly whatever. So with that said, let's get started. Okay, so following the directions, you're going to have your window panes. And these are 3/4 inch by whatever, meaning that 0.25 or 1/4 inch is going to be shown for the rest of the pieces. There's a trick, and you can also watch my YouTube on getting the skinny on piecing, but I'd love to show you some tricks. So the first step is you're going to sew this 2 inch by 3/4 inch to each short end of a window pane. Now, I did one and I pressed, instead of pressing them open, I pressed this up, okay? Now, I know that most of you would be tempted to take your next piece and line it up like this and sew it like this, right? But no, what I'd like to do is to sew with the trim on the top. And the reason why, with these little skinny pieces, if you're off even a little bit, it tends to really show. So in order to make this look really good, the trick is not to look at this side. I should be tempted to line this up, but rather on my foot, each edge of the foot is a 1/4 inch away from the needle. So I'm going to run the 1/4 inch side on this side along this seam. And that will ensure that I get a really nice straight seam and that exactly a 1/4 inch is going to be shown. Okay. And then I'm going to do the same with this side. Again, I'm going to press this out like this. And if I were at home doing this, I would do this exactly. I would finger press it. Here's my next window pane. So it's going to go like this. But I'm going to put the trim piece on the top, line it up, and using my existing seam on this side, and some of you may have the bigger machines with the wider stitch width. I'm going to show you what to do if that's the case the next time. Okay, so now I can be assured that I have a really nice even 1/4 inch the whole way across. All right, since this one, I want these seams to be pressed in the same direction. So these guys will both go down. Okay, and there's a reason, there's a method to my madness, and I'm going to show you. This goes down. So I'm going to give it a quick press. And I press, I do not iron. So this is pressed down and this is pressed up. Okay? So one side of your window pane is going to be pressed this way, and the other one is going to be pressed this way. And there's a reason why in a second I'm going to show you. All right. Now, pay attention because this is a little weird, but you'll see why in a minute. So I had you cut a 3/4 inch by 6 inch strip. I intentionally had you cut it too big. It is not going to match. So I don't want you to worry about lining it all up at the top. What I'm more concerned about is that the whole thing covers. Okay, so I'm going to sew this down to one side of my window. And again, there's going to be extra. And I found that your overall window will be much more precise if you allow for a little easement. Okay. And I'm going to press this. I don't really think it matters, but I'm going to press it towards the window pane. Give it a quick iron. Okay. All right. Now, this is where the magic happens. Since this one is pressed down and this one is pressed up, what's more important than lining everything up on the ends is to line up the center of your block. And again, we're going to focus on this piece being on the top. And so you're going to want to nestle. You can feel it. You're going to want this to nestle together. Okay? And you're going to nestle it all the way across. I can feel that lock into place all the way across. If some of you have a 1/4 inch foot that is a 1/4 inch on this side, but is wider on this side, what I'd like you to do, and this will blow your mind, but it's okay, is I'd like you to sew the piece this way, with your 1/4 inch side running along that existing seam. That way you'll get a nice even 1/4 inch. But for those of us who have just the normal poor man's 1/4 inch with the not fancy big old thing, I'm going to use the left side. And again, I am not worried about lining anything up here. All I care about is that the center is nice and lined up. Okay, and I'm just going to sew, focusing on that existing seam line. And that will help me ensure that that 1/4 inch line is good and consistent throughout the whole thing. Okay. And look at that, like magic. These line up really nicely. You don't get that wonky little jump. And up here is just gobbledygook. We're going to trim it. All right, so I'm going to press this down. And then I'm going to get ready to trim it. So I'll be right back. All right, so we have our window pane here, and now we have to trim this. So we are going to trim it to a 3x5 rectangle. Think of a note card, right? 3x5. Okay. So half of 3 is 1.5, right? And half of 5 is 2.5. So I'm going to put my ruler. If you can see that the 1.5 line dissects that center pane, and the 2.5 line dissects the horizontal line. And I'm going to trim this now. Flat hand, trim, trim. And then it's a matter of 3 by 5, and then just double check to make sure that your center lines are good. Now we have a 3 by 5 rectangle for our window. With what's most important are these are nice and even, and they're nice and they're not segregated or stacked up or weird looking. And now all we have to do is put our 3/4 by 5 inch rectangles on each side, lining it up. So I'm just going to sew these to each side. I typically like to oversize my pieces or my parts and trim them down when I can. I find that especially with these little 1/4 inch stashing pieces, it tends to be overall a little bit more accurate. The overall effect. We like our things to be accurate, but we don't want like the stress of having to be perfect all the time. If we could just trim away the rest of our imperfections in life, right? Okay, so we have that, and then the 3.5 by 3/4 inch goes on top and the bottom, and then you have a window. I'll do this really quick and we'll be right back. All right, here's our window. So you're going to make a total of 20 of these for the entire house, for the quilt. So have fun building your windows. Pella is jealous. And we will see you next month where we will start to do our blooms. See you then.